The story of Joseph is a story of an innocent man who was thrust into an unjust situation because of circumstances far beyond his control. And I want to invite you to explore that story together with me. Joseph was just a young man. And why was it that his brothers became so insanely jealous when he told them about these dreams? You see, Joseph was not just Joseph, but was part of a larger family, a family that had passed down issues from one generation to the next. And you find out as you read his story that he had a father named Jacob and 11 brothers from 4 different wives. And as it turned out, there were family dynamics that were at play in this family from one generation to the next that Joseph didn't cause. They weren't his fault, but which at some point swallowed him up. And this is how it went. Joseph had a great-grandfather whose name was Abraham. He had a grandfather whose name was Isaac, and a father whose name was Jacob. By the way, these are the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if you follow their story, here's how it goes. Abraham had 2 sons. The name of his 2 sons were Isaac and Ishmael. And although Ishmael was the oldest son, the story goes that Isaac was the one who was selected, and Ishmael the one rejected. Now, Isaac also had 2 sons. The name of his 2 sons were Esau and Jacob. Esau, again, was the oldest son, Jacob the younger. But as it turns out, in this family, one was selected, Jacob, the other rejected. And you can imagine now, if this had been the pattern in your family for generations, how easy it would be for Jacob's family of 11 sons to simply conclude that when their father had given to one of these sons a multicolored robe, and this son happened to be the oldest son of his favorite wife, you can understand why in their thought process it would have only been natural to think, aha, it's going to happen again. One is going to get selected, and the rest of us are going to get rejected. And so after his father had given him this coat, and after Joseph had told the brothers the dreams, you can understand how they became insanely jealous of this one brother and even hatched a plot together to get rid of him. And it so happened one day that while they were out tending the flocks and Joseph came to check on them, they saw him coming in the distance and they plotted together, let's kill him and be done with this one. But as the time grew close for them to do that, they made another plan. They threw him into a well, stripping him of his coat, and sold him off into slavery. There were some slave traders on their way to Egypt who came by, and they sold him for a measly amount of money. And here's what they did. They took the coat that their father had given to Joseph. They killed a goat. They sprinkled that blood all over this coat, and they presented it to his father so that he believed he was dead. These were the issues running down the generations. And you may ask yourself, well, how in the world could these sons deceive their father in that way? And I suggest to you that, again, family issues were at play. You see, Jacob's name literally means deceiver in Hebrew. And if you read his story, he was a man who lived up to that name. I told you already that Isaac had 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. And if you read about their story in the Bible, you'll find out that this is what had happened. Esau was the oldest son, and it was just customary in that time that the oldest son would not only receive the inheritance from the father, but also it was customary that at the end of his life, the father would pronounce a blessing, a spiritual blessing, on the oldest son. Jacob deceived his father and his brother so that he'd receive both of those things. As it turns out, Esau was a man's man. Jacob, a little bit more of a mama's boy. And one day after Esau had been out hunting all day, he'd come home. Jacob had been cooking, and Esau was really hungry. Jacob says, listen, brother, I'll give you some of this stew if you sell your birthright to me. And that's how he tricked his brother into selling his birthright to him. Not only that, Jacob not only tricked his brother, he also tricked his father. As I told you, Esau was the one who was to receive his father's blessing, and at an old age, as Isaac's eyesight was beginning to fail, one day while Esau was out in the fields, Jacob hatched this plan to deceive his father. Esau was a red man who was very hairy, and so Jacob dressed up in a costume, looking just like his brother, went in and said, "Father, it's me, your son Esau. Now give me your blessing." And Isaac blessed Jacob. Jacob once again lived up to his name, deceiving his father. This was an issue, a pattern in this family by now. And so, it was no strange thing to this deceiver's sons that one day when they hatched this plan and gang up on Joseph, it was not a strange thing for them to do, to take that coat, dip it in blood, and deceive their father into thinking that his favorite son is now dead. The deceiver has been deceived. But poor Joseph, an innocent man, trapped in an unjust situation, sold now as a slave to Egypt because of circumstances that he did nothing to create.